Hello and welcome to the podcast, Life's Second Act. This is the podcast that delves into the transformative phase of mid or later life, exploring its challenges, new directions and uncertainties that come with it. And we do that through talking to people who have a story to tell, an insight to share, or a snippet of something special. My name is Simon Burgess, and in this episode we speak to Jeremy Kourdi.
Maybe I was drawing on the historian's perspective here, which is to take a broad perspective of an 80, 90-year life and understand that in the course of that, you're going to have wonderful times. You're going to have the most exciting, fulfilling, fabulous moments and days, weeks, years in your life. And you're also going to have challenges and tragedies, and that's just the way it is. That's what living a life is.
Jeremy is 59 with a rich career spanning several decades. He began his journey in the late 1980s studying politics and history at Newcastle University and international relations at Kent University. He initially worked in business publishing, rising to head of publishing at the UK's Chartered Management Institute. By the late 1990s, he became a senior vice president with the Economist Group, significantly enhancing their conferencing and corporate networking businesses, and engaging with senior politicians and industry leaders, including 22 heads of government. In 2002, he ventured into entrepreneurship, establishing a writing and research business and qualifying as an executive coach, working with prominent organisations like HSBC, Pearson and the BBC. In 2020, he founded Kourdi Associates for business writing and executive coaching, followed by Expert Leaders in 2023, an AI-assisted leadership learning platform. Jeremy has penned 29 business books, with his first being released back in 1998 and the next 50 Ideas That Changed the World of Work, slated for publication in 2025. The books have been translated into 17 languages, selling over 1 million copies worldwide. Outside of work, he's a movie buff, loves walking, playing table tennis, and watching live sports like tennis, football, rugby, and hockey. One of his favourite quotes is from Churchill: "Success is not final, failure is not fatal, it is the courage to continue that counts." Jeremy, thank you for joining me on this journey. How are you?
Simon, thank you for that introduction. Wow. That's it. Can we stop now? That I've reached a high point and it's probably going to be downhill from here. Actually, can I recommend that everybody needs that? Everybody needs to reflect on their life. And I'm going to have my trouble getting my head through the door at the end of this conversation, I think. It's a serious point, though, isn't it? When we do look forward a lot, I think. I kind of remind people of this when I'm coaching, and we don't take enough time to look over our shoulder. And I think if you do that, I mean, you can't be doing it all the time, but it is useful to look over your shoulder. And obviously that's part of what you do on Life's Second Act. So it's great to be here.
Thank you. And I think that quote really encapsulates, I think, why I wanted to speak to you and so interested to talk to you and about your journey, because I think you've been on quite a journey since you sort of crept into your 50s. So I just want to set just a bit of context, hoping what our conversation will be about. Bereavement, losing your son of 29 and your mother to dementia, heart surgery, prostate cancer, and a huge shift in your career. You know, some huge events there that have played into your story over the past sort of 9 years or so. I'm really interested to know, how do you remain strong and positive with such events? You know, have these made you reevaluate your purpose? And I guess what can we learn from those kind of stages that play into our lives? Before we delve into that, I'm just really intrigued. Distinguished and dynamic career marked by some significant achievements and really diverse roles, and you've had time to write 29 books. Going back, where did your passion for writing come from?
That's a lovely question. I've always had it. I think I've always had a passion for writing. At school, I was good at two things, exceptionally good at two things, and really bad at everything else. And the two things I was good at were English and history. And I was really, really bad at everything else. My A-levels, which I took in the early 80s, were English, history and economics. Did very well in English, very well in history. And I got an E grade, which back in the day was still a passing grade, in economics. And the day I joined The Economist as senior vice president, I did actually telephone my old economics teacher at school and just tell him he fell off his chair. He couldn't believe Mr. E grade economics A-level had just joined The Economist. But where did the passions come from? Well, here's the thing. I think we all have something in us, don't we, that we're good at, that we love, that we enjoy. And for me, it was a couple of things. It was writing and reading, which I do a fair amount of now, and history. And the history was really reflected in the studies. So international politics is really modern history, and politics is kind of history being written in the present, I guess. So they were my passion. So it was about tapping into those. The advice I give to school leavers, to younger people nowadays, of course, is find that passion, find that one or two things you love and that come easy to you, and try and build a career out of that.
So were you always confident with your writing, from a young age, or was confidence and finding yourself part of your journey in those earlier years?
That's such an important word. I'm glad we're hitting it early on. Confidence, I think. I've come to realise now, north of 50, that I used to think it was grades that matter. I used to think it was the subjects you study. And I see, I have nieces and young people in my lives in their teens, or maybe they're in their early 20s. They think it's about qualifications and experience. And so much of life, of course, is. So I'm not denigrating that. I'm not saying that that's unimportant, but we don't talk enough about confidence. I didn't have enough confidence, actually, looking back as a kid, although I was a confident writer. I think that's why I kind of went to those two things, English and history, because I knew I was pretty good at them.
Yeah.
But actually at everything else, I mean, all the stuff that matters, forging relationships or just having opinions or putting yourself forward or showing initiative, all of those things, having that drive, they were in pretty short supply, I would say. I was a pretty earnest young man in my 20s. I met my wife when I was just turned 18. We got married when I was 20. My son came along when I was 22. My daughter when I was 24. Life was pretty serious, and it was all about providing for family and all of that stuff. When frankly, in your early 20s, you need to be enjoying yourself. I mean, I don't regret it, I have to say. And my wife, we're divorced now, but we're still good friends, and she's a fantastic person. And I'm glad I did all of those things, but I don't know that I'd recommend it. I don't know that it was necessarily the way to go. I kind of fell into it.
I'm sort of moving on a little bit here, but do you feel AI is affecting us all? Okay, it's creepy into all of our lives, and I'm really interested and watching quite a lot of stuff to do with that on YouTube, because I'm really quite interested. But with writing at the moment, how do you feel about AI encroaching on really what you do?
That's a tough question. It's been a kind of surprising time and perhaps thought-provoking for me. So I have, as you kindly mentioned, I've actually written 30 books. The 30th comes out next year, but 29 have been published so far. And just to say on that, by the way, how do you write 29 books? Well, firstly, why do you write 29 books? You write it probably because you lack confidence in kind of pushing yourself forward. So writing is a great calling card. It's also very developmental. And frankly, Simon, secret here, I cheated. A lot of those books are co-authored, so it's me plus one or two others. So I am blessed with just great friends and co-authors.
It still takes a lot, though, doesn't it? It still takes. There's doing one, but to do 29 or
29. Well, that is true. But so to answer your question though about AI, I had positioned myself as a writer, and I found that I was getting a lot of work just falling into my lap. People needed writing about business or leadership, and I'd kind of cornered a big part of the market on that. So I was ghostwriting, I was writing speeches, I was doing reports, research, event summaries. I think that's where we first connected, back in the day, working on events together. And then one day it didn't fall into my lap. And I could see business was drying up. It wasn't disastrous because I was a coach and a writer, so I was able to keep the lights on and things moving forward with the executive coaching. But I realized it wasn't, this whole AI thing wasn't extrinsic. It wasn't something that was happening to everyone else. It was actually coming home. And when I spoke to past clients, they said, well, Jeremy, we don't need your writing skills. I mean, undoubtedly, you're a brilliant writer, they would say. But they said, Jeremy, we can get what you do using AI. And although you're probably better at doing it, AI is a whole heck of a lot cheaper. So we're going to go with AI and not with you. And I'm quite an optimist, always an optimist. And I thought, well, how can I turn this to my advantage? So that's when I developed this platform. You touched on Expert Leaders, actually, which has video and text from myself, but also other experts and practitioners and executives sharing their insights. The thing that holds it all together, the theme, is helping leaders navigate and shape the future. But I saw it as an opportunity. I saw it as a way of enhancing leadership development.
So you've really embraced it, really. You've been curious with it. You've embraced it.
It's the only game in town, isn't it? You can't be like King Canute. If the tide is coming in, you have to accept that the tide is coming in and go with it. I didn't want to be kind of saying, "Oh, this is terrible." I didn't want to be negative. I mean, I could have done that, but it would have done me no good at all. Why not turn it into a blessing?
Speaking of challenges, you've obviously faced some very deeply personal ones. Can we sort of dig into that a little bit and maybe talk about some of those experiences and how they've shaped your sense of purpose? And I think when you were knocking on the door of 50, give or take a little bit, you were going to enter a period of your life that, with a series of events really, that were really going to challenge you both emotionally and personally. Can we wind back to 2016? This was quite a big period in your life. Tell me what happened back then.
Can I say at the outset, I know that everybody, so my attitude now, and certainly that helped me get through some of these things we're about to talk about at the time, was, Jeremy, you're not alone in this. This happens a million times a day around the world to lots and lots of people. And I would say to everyone, actually, that in the course of a lifetime, you're going to have tough challenges, and you're going to have joyous times, and you're going to have pretty challenging times too, personally and professionally as well. So for me, it started in really around about 2013. My wife and I got divorced. It was sad. It was difficult. It's not unusual. In 2016, March 2016, or a little before that, I discovered I had a heart murmur, essentially, and my underlying health is good, but I had essentially a pulled muscle in my heart, which required a 5-hour kind of open heart surgery. They switched me off for 5 hours while they operated on my heart. So this heart and lung machine performed the functions of my heart and lungs for 5 hours while they repaired this torn muscle in my heart. So I had that, came through that. And then 3 months later, in June 2016, so it was the day before the Brexit referendum here in the UK, my son passed away. He was 29. His name was Tom, and we were very close. We'd actually been out to dinner the night before he passed away, and we had a lovely evening, and we kind of been chatting about politics, about the Brexit referendum, and Donald Trump's first bid for the White House and all of that. We had a lovely evening and a funny evening chatting. Tom was always great company. But he died. He died of a heart attack on the 22nd of June 2016. That taught me actually that, I can rationalize, I can be objective, I can talk to you about things now. I think in the immediate maelstrom or aftermath of an event like that hitting, you can't rationalize, really. I think emotion swamps you, and you just have to allow that to happen. You can't fight it. But don't confuse that swamping of emotion with the way forward or everything else. It is part, they say it's part of the grieving process, and it is. And so 2016 was a pretty tough year, really. It was fairly difficult. It taught me a few things. It taught me that it taught me about depression. Depression is thinking the same things, circling the same dark thoughts time and again. For me, it was the questions of what could I have done to save Tom? Is there anything I could have said or helped him with, or even the night before, or at any point in his 29 years, could I have done something to result in a different outcome? And that question kept kind of churning around in my head. Of course, there's no answer to it. Maybe I could, maybe I couldn't, but so what? I would never know if whatever answer I came up with was correct, and either way, it wouldn't bring him back. So why dwell on that? Why waste time on that? The sun will rise tomorrow morning. It'll be another fantastic day, and you'll only get another day. Tomorrow's not going to come again. It's only going to come once.
Where do you think your strength has come from within yourself to be able to tackle or work through that in a very logical way?
I don't know. I don't regard myself necessarily as a strong person. Thank you for suggesting that. But where does it come from? I don't know. Maybe actually having several things, starting with the divorce and then the fairly serious surgery and then the passing of my son, it's kind of teaching me that, Jeremy, this is life. And as I said at the start, you're not the only one to have a son pass away, to have a heart operation, to have a divorce. These things happen. They don't usually happen within the space of a couple of years, but they do happen. And, it's sad. But then maybe I was drawing on the historian's perspective here, which is to take a broad perspective of an 80, 90-year life and understand that in the course of that, you're going to have wonderful times. You're going to have the most exciting, fulfilling, fabulous moments and days, weeks, years in your life. And you're also going to have challenges and tragedies, and that's just the way it is. That's what living a life is. So up to that point, I had a fairly blessed life. And I think it just taught me that, okay, this is what happens. And it may come again. You may get other challenges.
You've had everything that's gone on here, but then you also decided around 2020 to shift things again and change your career. I think you started your business then in 2020 and you wanted to get away from the commute. Again, is another big change, that impacts how we feel and the people around us, trying to find a better work-life balance. And how did that play into your mental well-being as well?
One thing that dawned on me in my 50s, I think, was, Jeremy, you need to get better at noticing weak signals. And I think it really helps I coach people, because often I'm listening to them and I'm thinking this person needs to get better at noticing weak signals. And I realized in my 50s that actually applied to me as well. I wasn't enjoying particularly the job I was doing. And because of that, I wasn't very good at it. And because I wasn't very good at it, my employer was probably going to show me the door in about 6 months' time. And there were weak signals that indicated that was how things might play out. And it was a little bit complicated. I was in a sales role and I kept coming back with opportunities that were too small for the organization I was working for, but that I could make a decent living on. So I thought, well, why don't you do that then? Why don't you take control, seize some of these opportunities, and just take a diversion from this kind of road that you're on that might not end happily for you? So it was a little bit stick. It was a little bit, gosh, I do need to do something here. But it was a little bit carrot as well. I always say to people, and I firmly believe, it's easier to move towards something positive than away from a negative. So for me, the positive was having more autonomy, being able to row my own boat, having the thrill, frankly, for me, the excitement of building my own business. And it worked, actually. I have enjoyed that. I have no regrets since starting my first business, coaching business in 2020, January 2020. And, I feel guilty to say this, but I had a good pandemic. Work came to me still. I was able to help people, support leaders as they develop their effectiveness. So that was great. And then the AI thing started emerging through 2022. So I added the leadership platform, the AI-powered leadership platform, Expert Leader, to that portfolio as well. And I've enjoyed it. I have to say, really enjoyed it. But it comes from understanding, a little bit of self-awareness there, noticing weak signals, moving towards something positive. This is the other thing, frankly, that some of those difficulties and challenges in life teaches you. Life is too short to be wasting it with drudgery. Every day is an opportunity, so don't waste it.
I mean, I hear you, and I've read the book, got the T-shirt, kind of watched the movie, but sometimes me personally, I still find it so difficult to make a change, to have the courage, being brave to make the change. I find it really difficult myself to do. So when I speak to people like yourself with the journey that you've been on, I just find it fascinating to know, where that comes from, within you. Because moving on from there, 2021, I think you lost your mum to dementia.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, when you're in your 50s, you're obviously sometimes sandwiched between, your kids of a certain age and those who have parents, and you're sort of bookended with two lots of people to sort of look after. How did you navigate that period with your mum? Because it must be really difficult to try and strike that balance between, your own self-care and yet caring for loved ones, because that must have played into how you felt as well.
It comes back to this thing about we have to live the best life we can. For me, and I don't know if this would work for everybody, but it works for me. And it's to kind of come up with a logic that says, we love someone, we love those nearest to us, so that's our children and parents. We love them to the fullest extent we can. We do all that we can. But there's a point beyond which we can't go. So there was a moment, for example, when my mother had dementia, and we have really, at the time then, and I think now hopefully it'll change soon, really poor social care in the United Kingdom. We really don't, certainly in 2021, didn't look after our elderly particularly well. And it was the case with my mother. But I couldn't look after her. I had a business to run, and I had relationships that mattered to me, and I didn't have the finances to help her out. So I saw her, I helped her, I tried to get support for her. But what I couldn't do was bring her into my house, and one of my brothers suggested that. I said, I can't do that, because that would be a step too far. That would mean me caring for my mother full time. And I couldn't do that with the other responsibilities I had. This is what I mean when I say you love someone to the fullest extent you can, but there is a line. There is a line that you can't go beyond, because if you do, you stop living your life. It's certainly, I think in other cultures that would be quite alien. And maybe even in this culture, Anglo-Saxon Western culture, it would seem strange, but I'm okay with that. You love someone to the fullest extent you can, but you have to live your own life. Even towards the end of her life, my mother was still teaching me things. For example, she died really without any money. She hadn't saved. She had made no provision for her old age. And so she was really in a bit of a tight spot. And when I asked her about this when she was still alive, and before the dementia, she said, well, kind of hoping that something will turn up financially is not a brilliant strategy. It was her strategy, and I witnessed at the end that didn't work out for her. That was one of the greatest gifts my mother ever gave to me, because growing up, we'd never talked about money. She didn't help me understand really the value of money. I mean, she loved me hugely, but she didn't give me many practical lessons. I observed that she didn't have any money. And Jeremy, unless you get yourself sorted out, you really need to make provision for your future as well. You've got 10, 15 years to do it. So crack on. You need to make that work. So that was a lesson that my mother taught me. And life is full of that. Life is full of learning in unexpected places. Reflect on the situation, even something as sad as the passing of a parent, and think, well, what have I learned from this situation?
Yeah. So a year later, Jeremy, prostate cancer?
I've got to tell you about this. So I'm clear of prostate cancer now. Can I just say a couple of things? Firstly, in the UK with our National Health Service, my experience of the NHS had been with things like broken bones and twisted ligaments and that kind of thing. And they're really pretty tardy, and they really they'll fit you in if they can. If you have anything wrong with your heart, or if you have prostate cancer, they propel you through the bureaucracy at breakneck speed. I tell you, one of the most terrifying things about heart conditions and prostate cancer is the speed with which the NHS treats you, which really makes you think, heck, this must be pretty serious. I had gone to my GP, Simon, with the same symptom 8 times in 10 years. It's quite personal. Let me share with you what it was. I was peeing too much through the night. So 8 times in 10 years, I went to my GP telling him this. And to his credit, he gave me, because obviously it's one of the signs of prostate cancer, excessive urination. So he gave me a blood test 8 times in 10 years, and 7 times it was negative, and the 8th time it was positive. It was very early stage, and it was prostate cancer. It was mad because having found it, the response was, well, you can live with it, Jeremy. Actually, it's really small, it's really early, so don't worry. We'll keep an eye on it, and you don't need to treat it. I said, okay, that's not going to work for me. I need to get rid of this. So very long story short, I paid in the UK privately to have it treated. It was treated with ultrasound, which got rid of it, which is pretty non-invasive, doesn't damage any other tissue around there, which is one of the challenges with prostate cancer. And now I'm clear. I'm still getting checked every 6 months. I'm making sure I'm having those blood tests to make sure it doesn't recur. I would say to people, so there's a couple of lessons there. Whatever symptom you have yourself tested. Even if you're clear, but the symptom persists, go back in 6 months' time. And again, as I say, 8 times in 10 years. Heck, I was knocking on this guy's door every 6 months.
I was surprised you didn't get to number 6 or 7 and go, do you know what? I'm probably fine.
Well, that's right. I would encourage anybody, particularly north of, over 50, any physical change at all. We know what that is for men. We know what that is for women. Anything slightly unusual, go get it checked out. And like I said, I couldn't believe it when it was positive and they said, no, you can live with it. I thought, no, that's not going to happen.
Just to finish, 2024, we're in, as we record this, you were watching a movie at the start of the year, I understand, and something else happened.
So I'm sitting down enjoying a movie on Netflix with my best friend, and we're watching this thing, and we've had a lovely evening and a light supper, and it's maybe 9 o'clock in the evening, and I'm feeling pretty chilled. And I suddenly start getting pains across my chest. And as this movie is going on, I'm getting my tablet out and I'm Googling the symptoms of a heart attack. I've got 6 of the 7 symptoms of a heart attack. And I'm thinking, oh, wow, I wonder if that's what's happening. I really should probably call a paramedic or something. And then I realized that I'd ruined the movie for my other half that I was watching it with. And I was thinking, well, okay, what do? Do I call them? Do I bring this evening to a crashing halt and call, or do I just wait? Can I wait another half hour? And I came to the conclusion, no, buddy, if you think you're having a heart attack, really, you got to be calling the paramedics. You can't be hanging on. So I did. Anyway, it turns out it was a panic attack. Long story short, paramedics come, take me to hospital, check me out, spend a few hours checking me out. At 3 o'clock in the morning, the next morning, they say, no, Jeremy, you've had no cardiac event at all. Everything's absolutely fine. You can go now, 3 o'clock in the morning. Not the most convenient time, but still reassuring. But it got me thinking, well, what was that? So in conversation with my GP, he said, Jeremy, have you considered it may have been a panic attack? And that's interesting, isn't it? Because it alerts you really to the ways your body can kind of do things without you controlling it, really. Yeah. So the grief of my son passing, no amount of rationalization, no amount of despairing. In fact, nothing I could do would would diminish that. You just have to put one foot in front of the other and walk through this fairly dark, dismal time. That's all you can do. So it was with the panic attack. You have to think, okay, this is your body telling you something, so maybe exercise a little more or get a better balance in your life. So that's how I reacted to that.
How have all these things that have played into your life over the last 8-9 years then, how have you coped with that really? You know, where has been your pillar of strength? Because you've used the word depressed early on quite rightly. And how have these affected who you are, your confidence, and finding your way through when they are some huge events? Where's your strength come from?
It's interesting, isn't it? Where's it come from? I think you have to learn the lessons that life is teaching you. You have to be aware that life is a journey, not a destination. I imagined I would get to some nirvana. I imagined in my 20s and 30s and 40s that I was working to build a family and make a pot of gold, and, you know, there would be some nirvana at the end of it. That's actually not the way life works. Enjoy each day. It's a journey, not a destination. The other thing, you know, a few other things. What got you here won't get you there. That's by the way, that's Marshall Goldsmith, perhaps my favorite business book, just because you don't actually need to read the book. I mean, it is a fabulous book, but everything you need to know is in the title. And the title is What Got You Here Won't Get You There. So in other words, you need to be alive to that. You need to be changing the way you approach life. You need to be kind of learning and rethinking things, learning from the passing of my mother, for example, that, you know, financial security really, really matters. I think there's something that I didn't do that I've learned to do as well, which is to be objective. You know, life deals you a tough hand. You can shout and scream and howl at the wind, but it won't change anything. You know, life doesn't care, really. You can bring emotion to it, but and if that helps you, great. But it's no solution. I mean, it's no long-term solution. So I think a little objectivity. I mean, emotion is good too. And emotion, as I've said before, is sometimes inescapable. But a little objectivity in there can help.
Can you ever feel guilty that good can come out of bad situations? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And I know people do. And yes, certainly when I was younger, I think I felt guilty like that. One of the things I've learned is, well, a couple of things. First, you know, be the best version of you that you can and understand the kind of person you want to be. And I think that's easier in our 50s and beyond than it is at any other age. You know, there are a lot of challenges that come with this, but the ability to process and think and draw on that experience and knowledge, I think that all helps. So I think if you understand who you are, if you think, you know, I am a flawed person trying to be a decent member of the human race, and you hold that dear, you work at it, because, you know, you have to, it's not something you can ever take for granted. But if you hold that dear, then I think you can learn without guilt. I think if you know yourself, it's back to this point about self-awareness. If you have that self-awareness, then there's no shame in or no problem with learning the lessons. And guilt doesn't really do a lot of good, does it? But it is a complex emotion, and it's often negative.
Yeah, so all of these things have played into your life, as I said, over the last 8 years or so. Has that shaped any greater sense of purpose for you in terms of who you are, the part that you play in the world, or has it posed more questions?
I think that's a good thing. I think the kind of person I am and aspire to be is one that questions and looks to learn. I think my definition of an old person is somebody who doesn't want to learn, who doesn't want to change, and who says, let's make this thing great again. That is an old person. That's a person who's stuck in the past, you know, and I hope I'm not that. I don't want to be that. So, but it's interesting you mentioned this word purpose, because working in business, it's a term that's over the last 10 years has really come to the fore. Organizations need a purpose, teams need a purpose, executives, leaders need to be driven by their purpose. And I kind of thought again that it was extrinsic or limited to business and organizations. But you're absolutely right, Simon. Absolutely right. Understanding who you are, what drives you, what you want to be is important. So for me professionally, whatever I do, if it's writing, if it's using AI as part of leadership development, if it's coaching, I can sum it up in a sentence. It's helping leaders navigate and shape the future. If it's about me personally, then it's about kind of learning and embracing life, because you only get one shot at this. You've got to do that. Sometimes I gotta say it's easier than other times, and sometimes you do get blown off course, and in pretty big ways as well. But you've got to learn. You've got to be open to that. I have this phrase: life is like live radio. If you make a mistake, you'll appreciate this on a podcast. You make a mistake, don't dwell on it. Just kind of learn from it, understand it.
I like that.
And move on. Yeah,
I like
life is like live radio.
I like that. What lessons do you think you've learned from your life's journey, your writing, your books? What have you learned when you look back about yourself, and what would you share with maybe a younger Jeremy?
That's a lovely question, sir. That's a fabulous question. Well, okay, there's a few. I've mentioned them already. I would say this thing about being alert to weak signals. Trust your judgment. So if something doesn't quite smell right, or if it looks a little bit off, whether that is, a reason to go to a doctor 8 times in 10 years, or whether it's a comment that a colleague makes at work or something like that, a weak signal, investigate it, reflect on it. Is it nothing, or is it worth a little bit of a deeper dive? Have the courage to do that. Plan a little bit. You've got to embrace life. You've got to go with the direction it takes you. But equally, you have to have a slightly longer term view. What would I say to the younger Jeremy? For goodness sake, Jeremy, sort your finances out. What are you going to be doing when you retire? Have you thought about that? Have you thought about what will sustain you? When I'm younger, by younger, I mean in my 30s or 40s, I could have been asked those questions. Yeah. That's too late. Kids nowadays, sadly, probably true in my day as well, actually, our day, needed to provide for themselves financially. I think that's important. One lesson, and again, I've touched on this before, remember the arc of history. So there's two mindsets you can adopt, and at various times I adopt them. Mindset number one, the historian. Your life will have an arc. It will include brilliant times and successes. And you touched on, 29 books, 22 heads of government that I've met with, fabulous places I've been. And it also includes tragedy. That's just the way it is. Just by the way, though, can I just say to anybody listening that focusing on your health is important. We've talked about this a lot today. I think if you're in good shape physically, when those inevitable health challenges come your way, you will get through them if you are fit and if you don't have any damaging health habits or conditions or anything like that. So try and get and stay in shape. That's one lesson. Okay, so you can either be a historian or you can be a scientist. Let's be objective about this. Let's try and understand what's going on. Let's take the emotion out of it if we can. What would a scientist say? What would somebody with that level of objectivity say? And so I find myself in my life, sometimes I'm a historian, sometimes I'm a scientist, but that works for me. Maybe that's the biggest lesson, Simon. Yeah. What works for you? Find out what works for you. Yeah. But you're right. Life, last 10 years probably, has kind of taught me these lessons. I think maybe that's the biggest one. If you're open to what life has to teach you as well, then that'll help. Yeah. Really will.
I heard an expression a while back that's always stuck with me is, love life the way it is, not the way you want it to be.
It's lovely, isn't it?
And
I think that's absolutely right.
It's because if you can accept the way things are, straight away you take the pressure off yourself. There's another thing doing it and believe. There's another thing doing it and executing.
That's right. Well, yeah, I love that. Yes, you're absolutely right. You have to just accept that. You can control so much, but you can't control everything. And you do. That's right. You do have to, in many ways, go with it. You can't. Yeah. Howling at the moon. If it makes you feel better for a night or two, fine, howl at the moon. But that can't be your life.
Brilliant. Just before I come on to one last question, which is a very simple one. Have you got a final thought to anyone that is going through a challenging time? Because you've had a few challenges thrown at you, and you've shared a lot today. What would you say to others?
Just to repeat, I know people have much bigger challenges than I've had, and people are going through them now, and everybody has them. That's perhaps the most significant thing. I think I would say that two things. Firstly, things will get better. I mean, even when my son passed, people said to me, Jeremy, things will get better. And they were right. They were absolutely right. So you have to understand that. You have to walk through dark places sometimes, but life changes, things change, and life improves. That's the first thing. Second thing, perhaps, is that life is simple. Kindness, love, friendship, companionship are good. Hating, neglect, addiction are bad. It's not that difficult, but often we can lose sight of that. So what helps is literature or music or movies or whatever entertains you, whatever grounds you in the truth that life is simple and the good things in life are really good. And this is what it's best to avoid. You can read it in Shakespeare. You can see it in a superhero movie. Yeah. It's all there. It's about courage. It's about the positive things. Yeah. So just open your eyes. Be alive to what's around you. I think that matters.
Yeah. Well, it's so much of what you've said. I've got absolute admiration for your courage to push through your journey. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Absolute credit to you. So, last question, which I've asked a few people, on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is I've got no idea where I'm going in my life, and 10, it's great, it's cool, I know where I'm heading, I've got it sorted, I can see the future, I've got a sense of purpose. Where would you put yourself?
That's so difficult, and I have thought about this question because I knew it was coming. I don't know. I don't think I want to be a 10. I don't think I want to be a 10. I think I want to be kind of 7.5. I think I'm equipped. I think I have a plan. I know where I'd like to go, personally, professionally, all of that. But I want it to be an adventure. As I say, I know that there are so many exciting places to go and unexpected. There's so much joy in the unexpected, isn't there, as well? I feel equipped. I feel prepared. But does anybody really know where they're going to, particularly, where are we now? Third decade of the 21st century. We've got election campaigns here in the UK and in the United States and AI and all the rest of it. Life is changing so fast. One thing that didn't, the England cricket team lost yesterday. So maybe some things never change. but with so much change, I've got to say I'm about a 7.5.
I think that's pretty good, to be honest with you. I think, I don't know where I'd put myself. I don't think it would be anywhere much above a 5 or a 6, but that's another conversation for another time.
I need to know from you. I'm not going to let you off the hook. Does it change for you after you reflect on these conversations?
Well, that is a very good point. And through all of the conversations that I've had, what I've said to some people is that reading a book or listening to someone else's podcast or watching a YouTube video about other people's experiences is great. But personally, where I've got so much joy out of these conversations is me being able to explore stuff myself with people firsthand. Yeah. And I think there's been quite a few things that have come out and some common themes that is making me really be curious about how I'm wired and why I respond like that. I mean, one of the things is definitely having the courage to change and push and do something different.
Yeah.
And I'm working through that at the moment, really, just trying to work out what is it that's stopping me. The word that's come up a couple of times is giving myself permission to do something. Yeah. And it's like, who's stopping me? It's probably...
You see, this is anybody listening to this podcast should understand that this podcast is itself a lesson. The fact that there's a host who is doing two things, who is challenging themselves and kind of pushing out of their comfort zone, doing something new, firstly, and is also in quite a deep and thought-provoking way kind of exploring these issues. Yeah. I think I think we should all do a version of that. I don't know that we can all do a podcast, but this has been absolutely brilliant for lots of reasons. But the chance to reflect is one of them. Thank you.
No, Jeremy, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciated it. And
you're welcome.
Thanks very much. I was in absolute admiration of Jeremy throughout that conversation. Life is like live radio. If you make a mistake, don't dwell on it. You learn from it, understand it, and you move on. I love that line. It's about maintaining resilience and forward-looking attitude, adapting and learning from each experience rather than being bogged down by those past errors. His series of personal losses and health issues has taught Jeremy the value of objectivity and self-awareness, recognising the importance of understanding one's limitations and balancing self-care with caring for loved ones. Also loved how he adopts a historian's perspective to his life, understanding the broad arc of life with its highs and lows, and the scientist's approach, maintaining objectivity and learning from every situation. Thanks, Jeremy, for sharing your story, one of resilience, continuous learning, and adapting to life's inevitable challenges with a balanced perspective on both personal and professional fronts. It's so interesting for me that each of these conversations I have, I am learning something about myself. I'm not sure I have all the pieces of the puzzle yet for embracing the new Simon, but I guess it's a journey. I really hope that you find some value in these conversations too. So let's continue the journey next time on life's second act. Until then, take care and goodbye.